Those of us who are digital immigrants, and that's everybody 24 or older. We're all digital immigrants. Even though I grew up with the internet, I had an internet identity when I was in graduate school. I didn't get into it until I was in my 20s. Om's growing up with this stuff. So he sees things in a full spectrum way where we're still stuck in those categories of the past.
Welcome back to Futurists World, everyone. I'm Mike Hill, and I am so excited to be joined by two very special guests. We're talking today about the future of the future. What's that mean? Well, it means the future of young people and what they're facing as they come into their adulthood. I am joined today by the amazing Bob Johansen, Grandmaster Yoda of Futurists, author and distinguished fellow at the Institute for the Future in Silicon Valley, California. For more than 30 years, Bob has helped organizations around the world prepare and shape for the future. He is a guru, and I'm so excited to be joined by Bob. I would love to mention some of Bob's recent books, which include his new release, Full Spectrum Thinking, which is amazing, available as an audio book and as a paperback, and also the new Leadership Literacies and Leaders Make the Future. Today I'm also joined by Om. Om is a 10-year-old student from Melbourne, Australia. He also boasts a heritage from Punjab. Born in 2010, Om is what Bob calls a digital native at the leading edge of the youthquake generation. Om loves spending time with his family and friends, including my son Jack. He loves gaming, superheroes, and the sport of cricket. Bob, Om, thanks for joining me here today on Futurists World.
Great to be here.
Yep, same here.
So I want to talk today about what Bob calls the 2010 threshold and the idea of digital natives. Bob, can you tell me about this threshold? What does that mean to you?
Sure. So 2010, the year that Om was born, was the first digital threshold. And the way I think about it, that was when the iPhone in 2007 and the iPad kind of came together and got practical. So there was the first media ecology, if you will, that was characterized by these very graceful interfaces compared to what we had before. So if you're a young person, like Om is now, if you're a young person just beginning to become an adult, when that kind of media breaks open and that new kind of space appears, you're just going to be different. And that's what I characterize as the first true digital natives. So 2010 was the first threshold. Now, Om is even more powerful. He's coming of age in 2020, which is what I think will be the next digital threshold, with concepts like the Oculus Quest, the kind of much more graceful virtual mixed augmented reality interfaces. And Om's going to be different. Om's going to be different in ways we don't know how. He doesn't even know how yet. And yes, these thresholds, these digital thresholds, affect young people in powerful ways. So I think of Om and people in his age group, I think of them as not just true digital natives, but as cross-reality natives or XR natives.
So that's a great analysis there, Bob. Can you ask Om a couple of questions that would help us understand how immersed he is in this digital technology?
Sure, I'd love to. I got to meet Om in advance, and I should point out I'm calling in from my home on Bainbridge Island near Seattle, and Om is in Sydney, Australia. So you're actually living in the future right now, Om. You're tomorrow, and I'm yesterday. So this is a good way to have this conversation. But I wonder if you could tell me about how you use FIFA, the game, the EA game, and also how you play soccer. Can you just describe both of those experiences?
Now, both of those experiences, they have their own pros and cons. Like with the real world FIFA, if you play soccer in real life, then it's much more fun playing with real life friends. And it's much more fun, and it helps you adapt to where you are, and it helps you make skills. But the con is you could actually get hurt and injuries and stuff like that. But whereas in the game, FIFA, you can change the difficulty. You have power over what you do, so you can do any difficulty, and even if you get hurt, you won't really get hurt, like only the character will. And the con about the game FIFA is like you really just want to like talk to your friends and play with them. Like you can talk to them with a headset, but it's just not the same as actually meeting them.
It being and playing around, yeah. So when you're in the game, in the FIFA game, are you the player yourself? I mean, do you think of the player as yourself?
Well, whenever I'm playing FIFA, I would think of the player as me because, like, not really as me, but like the person that I'm controlling. And it's like a consciousness, and like it's just I can control it and I can move it wherever I want. So it's kind of like.
Kind of like, and is it like you have a superpower when you're in the game?
Yeah, like you could change the rules, you can change the difficulty, you can do whatever you want. You could just. Basically, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you can do anything basically in the game. Like, and even if you had the Unreal Engine, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but the Unreal Engine is like you can actually stop time and then like do anything you want with it.
Yeah,
It's really cool.
Yeah, so it's not like you have either the online game, the FIFA game, or the soccer game in the physical world. You like them both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I mean by full spectrum thinking, that instead of viewing the world as an either this or that, young people like are able to see a full spectrum of options. And it's not either video games or real life. In his mind, it's a spectrum, a kind of gradual spectrum across gradients of possibility, not just an either or. And Mike, that's so important because, those of us who are digital immigrants, and that's everybody 24 or older, we're all digital immigrants. Even though I grew up with the internet, I had an internet identity when I was in graduate school. I didn't get into it until I was in my 20s. Om's growing up with this stuff. So he sees things in a full spectrum way where we're still stuck in those categories of the past.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about that, Bob. So this idea of categorical thinking for digital immigrants like myself, how do we bust out of that? What do we need to do to, future-proof ourselves and try and become a little more full spectrum?
So first of all, we can't future-proof ourselves. It's a highly uncertain, frightening future. I teach at the Army War College. They call it the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. So the first beginning mindset is we can't control this. We can't future-proof it, but we can think beyond the categories of the present. And our brains are always trying to predict the future, even though we can't predict the future. Our brains are always trying to categorize life as this or that, even though, as Om is teaching us, there's a whole spectrum of opportunities, a spectrum of problems, a spectrum of challenges that we just have to get used to. So the beginning is we have to accept the fact we can't predict, we can't control, we can't have certainty, but we can have clarity. And what wins in this world is you want to be very clear where you're going, but very flexible how you get there. So the good news is the tools of full spectrum thinking, the tools of clarity are getting dramatically better. Things like big data analytics, like gameful engagement, the interfaces in the FIFA game are maybe 10 times better than anything we have in offices, even if we use the Mac or the Surface or the Chromebook. So young people are growing up with a much more graceful interface than we are. And the tools are getting so much more practical. These digital tools are getting so much more practical to help us see the complexities of the world and avoid these kind of simplistic categorization or labeling like we used to do in the past. And many people still do because they get so confused by the VUCA world.
Now, in your latest book, Bob, Full Spectrum Thinking, I was really fascinated by this idea of distributed everything. And I want to unpack that a little bit for the audience. But I wanted to put it in the context of a project that Om's doing at school right now. Om, your friend Jack was telling me last night, my son, telling me about the project you have at school, which is running your own business. And just wanted to hear a little bit about that, because there were some conversations that came out of that really fascinated me. Can you tell us a bit about the project you're working on?
In school we're doing this thing called Earn and Learn, which every year grade 5s do. And in that you actually make your own town. Our town was called Rickaslia. And we actually got to choose what business we run. We had our own money, and we had different types of places in the political world. We had a mayor, we also had the chief of police, which was me, and we got money per day, like our salary, which the chief of police, me, I got like, I think $250 per day. And we also ran our own businesses. Like I personally joined businesses with some people who insisted me to join them. We were doing fan art and paper planes. I was doing paper planes, and then they were all doing the fan art. And yeah, we've been doing that for a long time now. And the grade 3-4s actually came in to buy some of our stuff. And yeah, you run your own business. And kind of gives you like a feel, and you have your own bank accounts as well. So it gives you a feel of like how it will be when you're older, and you can get fines as well. And it costs money to even use a chair or a table. It costs money for everything.
Interesting. So that's very cool. And what Om just did with us is he told us a story, except you're in the story, right, Om? I mean, you're playing a role. You're the police. You're getting paid. You're exchanging things.
Yeah, and another example, Bob, was, so my son, who's not in the same year level, who will be doing this project next year, has already started brainstorming what he's going to come up with. And he's talking about doing an origami company. So it sells origami, but as an avatar of the person who buys it. So you could have an origami Om or an origami Bob, and you might buy that, and then you send a photo and it gets delivered, I suppose, in the mail.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, what we're doing right now is we're sharing stories, and we're giving these frameworks for stories. And this is really important because the neuroscientists teach us that our brains are wired for stories. And if they don't hear stories, they make them up. They make them up. So we're all storytellers. We have to be storytellers. Now, the great thing about games, like what Om plays and what your son plays, games are stories, but you get to be in the story. And Jane McGonigal in our group defines a game as emotionally laden attention, which is basically the same definition as a story, except you get to be in the story in a game, and you're amplified. Like Om was telling us about the superpowers he feels in the FIFA game, we're amplified by digital media. So it's just a kind of powerful feeling. And I wonder, can you tell us just how do you feel when you're in a game and things are going really well? Can you describe what it feels like?
Like, if I'm playing a game like Spider-Man PS4, and if it's like a really tough level, like, for example, the first level beating Fisk, it feels like really good when you do it. You just feel like you've accomplished something that's impossible. That feeling, it just comes to you, it's a natural feeling. Like when Neil Armstrong made the first step on the moon, he would have had that feeling as well. That he did it, he accomplished it.
So, are you Spider-Man?
Oh, in the game, yes, I'm Spider-Man.
Yes.
Peter Parker.
Okay, good. And are you nervous right now at all?
Kind of, yeah, a little bit.
Kind of, you don't act it at all. You act like you're completely comfortable doing this.
Yeah,
So I wanted to talk to you guys about gaming and learning, because we kind of, did a little segue into the school project there, which is part of the education system. And Bob, you've thought a lot about this intersection between learning and gaming. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And maybe we can see how that relates to Om's lived experience.
Sure. So my forecast is what we think of as video gaming today, thinking 10 years ahead, I think future back. So I live my life 10 years ahead. I'm not an expert in the present. I'm rather helpless in the present at times, but I'm pretty good at sensing where things are going and thinking future back. So future back, what we think of as video gaming 10 years from now is going to be the most powerful learning medium in history. Because of that ability to tell stories in an engaging way and bring people in with emotion. That's going to be the way we learn. And Om is going to expect that. His generation is going to expect that. The military is actually way ahead of us in business with regard to this. And, they call it wargaming, where you immerse yourself in frightening situations to practice in low risk ways. And I visited some of their wargaming. They're like giant arenas, the largest one. I came to think of it as the world's largest video gaming parlor. It's about the size of the state of Rhode Island. It's a real hobby desert. It has real tanks, real actors, real helicopters. And they play a game for 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. And many people are killed without having to die because it's all simulated. They have sensors everywhere when they're playing these games. So in the future, that's going to be the way we learn. And that's the way Om's going to expect learning to happen, not to have people lecture to them and, tell them this, tell them that. They want to experience this and practice it in a low risk way. And some businesses are doing this. I mean, this is the way you train to be successful in an emergency room. They have simulated crises, and you basically pretend or simulate the crisis and respond. So medicine's actually ahead of other industries in this regard. But it's true, parents, we're as parents, and I'm a grandparent, we're all concerned about video games that are too sexual or too violent. And, even I've talked to his mom, and, she limits the number of games he plays. But still, and she helps him make choices of smart games and moral choices. But try to put that aside and think of the medium of gaming, not just the content of some of the worst of today's games, but the medium of gaming, immersive learning. And it's so much more powerful than traditional classrooms.
Wow. What do you think about this idea of this huge video game arcade in the middle of the desert in America with real
As soon as I heard that just sounded...
It does. It's totally mind-blowing, right?
I don't know if I've ever seen this movie, Ready Player One.
Yes.
It's about like these guys who are like, there's like a VR game, and it's an omnidirectional treadmill where you can actually move without going anywhere. And it's kind of like if nobody cares about the real world, whereas everybody just wants to be in that one game because you can do anything and move around without going anywhere.
Yeah. So how did you like that movie?
I actually really liked it. Yeah, it was really good. It was a good movie, and like some people were even crazy about the game because some people like for example the bad guy, I forgot his name, but he was crazy about the whole concept. But yeah, it was so cool. Like you could create your own avatar. You could give your avatar every single thing, like things that you like, or give him some superpowers that you like, and everything like that.
Yeah, so interesting. So that book, which preceded the movie, was written by a guy named Ernest Cline, and that book is used as required reading for new members of the Facebook Oculus team now. And that movie did a better job of anything I've ever seen, particularly some of the opening scenes, of creating and imagining what that world, the whole setting of this is the physical world gets so bad that the virtual world is where people need to go to have truly human and truly interesting and truly clean experiences. So it's set in a very negative way for the real world, but the virtual world has its pros and cons, but it creates this story where you can actually be in the story. And I love the fact that you've seen it already. That's terrific.
I want to go further on this movie. As you guys know, I love sci-fi, but in this movie, the main character, makes friends in the game that become real world friends.
Yeah,
he develops
personal.
skills in the game. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say
Yeah,
that.
just chiming in there. And he develops skills in the game that then become really important to his real life. So this is a bit about how we cross over between the virtual and real world. Bob, do you want to reflect on this a little more?
Yeah. So definitely that's getting back to full spectrum thinking. So this was in a completely immersive virtual world, but there's like a full spectrum that often gets confusing. You remember he meets people that he'd never actually met in person. And sometimes when he meets them in person, he's kind of disappointed. He said, "Oh, I thought you'd look like this, or I thought you'd look like that."
And he didn't even know his best friend was actually a girl.
Yeah. Wasn't that great? And it's just like Am was saying earlier about having superpowers when you're in the video world. You can choose your avatar and you can design yourself the way that you want to be. So right now in the physical world, we have these old-fashioned ways of thinking about physical appearance and so-called disabilities. Are you a person with disabilities? But in the virtual world, it doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair. It doesn't matter if you're on the autism spectrum. You can be a different person and you can behave in different ways and be a kind of new self in that virtual world. And to me, that's one of the most provocative ideas. And it's interesting here in Silicon Valley, there is a kind of great interest in what used to be, the medical community used to label people autistic. And now the language is autism spectrum disorders. And we're seeing people applying for jobs at Institute for the Future who say, I'm on the spectrum. And some of the people on the spectrum have superpowers, like Am was talking about. If you think of Greta Thunberg, for example, the famous climate activist, she's a little older than Am. She's about 15 now. She is on the autism spectrum, and she classifies that as one of her superpowers because she's so focused. So as we move into the future, we're going to move beyond just labeling people and move toward thinking of them as this full spectrum of possibilities. And in the virtual world, we can get superpowers, and gaming is helping us learn how that might develop.
Well, let's keep on that track of specialization, talking about Greta and bringing together a couple of these ideas, the wargaming in the Mojave Desert and Ready Player One. Let's bring in another sci-fi reference here. And I'm not sure it's one you know about. It's a famous book come movie called Ender's Game. Ever heard of that one?
Ender's Game? Oh, yeah, I haven't heard of that.
Oh, you got something to look forward to, Om. So this famous Orson Scott Card book is about, Bob, take it away. Tell us what Ender's Game's about and how that might relate to specialization for people like Om in the future.
So I talk about it in the Full Spectrum Thinking book, and Ender's Game. There's a movie of that as well, and ask your mom about it. I think if she lets you watch Ready Player One, she should let you watch Ender's Game. It's very cool, very interesting, and it's all about the kids having an ability to think better through gaming than the adults. And there's a mystery kind of evil force out there that turns out to be not as evil as they thought at first, but they thought it was really evil. And the whole theory of it is the kids are better prepared to fight the evil force than the adults because their minds work faster. You're natural full spectrum thinkers. And they teach them through three-dimensional gaming like you saw in Ready Player One. So the whole idea was the kids become the warriors because they have the mental capabilities that older people don't have.
I don't know if you ever seen the movie. I forgot the name.
It's okay. What is it
was
like?
a really good one. Oh yeah, Tron. Yeah.
Oh, Tron. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. It's about like this kid's dad who makes like a game, and in the game there's this place called the Grid, and the kid actually goes inside the grid and finds out that there's like a whole world inside the game, and they're like they held his dad captive.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's also this Indian movie called Ravan. It's where the game characters come to life.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the good guy and the bad guy, they come into the real world, and then there's this kid who like the kid, like the bad guy's after the kid, and so the good guy, like, they kind of have a fight, and it's actually a really cool movie.
Interesting. So, when you're talking about how real life and the game kind of come together and they get kind of confusing, does that upset you or does that excite you or how do you react?
I think like when the game and the real world cross over, it makes me kind of be like, oh, that is so cool. Because it would be really cool if like, oh, have you seen Pixels?
Yeah,
Pixels,
yeah.
yeah, the game come to life, and it was in. When I look at that, I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Especially like, but if I was in that situation, I would probably turn the other way and run.
Actually, I think you're ready for it. I love how
Yeah.
you reacted. And I think to me, that's why I'm so optimistic about you in particular, but also young people your age that are growing up with these digital media, and you're growing up with a sense of hope and a sense of excitement. I'm really optimistic about kids if they have hope. And you're in an environment where you can develop that hope. And when you see this kind of spectrum of the real world and the kind of virtual world, for a lot of adults, they get really weirded out by it. They say, "Whoa, I don't want any part of that. I want to stay in the real world." But you're ready. You're ready to embrace that, to engage with that, to make it something special.
So I want to go a bit further on this. So there was lots of great examples there about games, gaming, getting people ready for the challenges they face in the real world. And thanks for bringing up Pixels on. That's an excellent example. It's like, age-appropriate example, to Ender's Game. So how does this go then, Bob, as we start thinking about working with computers? So the type of work that Om might do in the future. Clearly, computers are getting more intelligent, and we could expect quantum computing to be a thing in 10 years or so. How is that going to affect the way that Om engages with the world?
Yeah, so I'll sort of take my crack at it, and then I'd love to get your view. But if you think of humans kind of on this side and computers over here, think of it as another spectrum from humans to computers. Over the next decade, we get to answer two questions. One of them is, what can humans do best? And the second is, what can computers do best? And we're going to imagine a space in the middle where I don't call it artificial intelligence. I don't really like that term because it implies the computer's replacing the human. I like the term augmented intelligence. And that's going to live in this space between, really half computer, half human, or some kind of mix one way or the other.
Like a
And my
cyborg?
favorite term is from a new book by Tom Malone in MIT. The new book's called Superminds, where we're mixing the human and the computer in ways that have never been mixed before. And instead of thinking about kind of the old story was computers replacing humans, and that'll happen in limited cases. But the real big story that Tom Malone talks about is how can humans and computers do things that have never been done before. And that's what Om's going to be able to do. And that's what his generation is going to be able to do. And that idea of an augmented computer, and where it's an augmented human and an augmented computer, or a supermind. So, you're a supermind, man. How does that feel?
That feels really cool, being a supermind. That just sounds really cool. A supermind, like, sound like a smart person, or sound like something that, like it just sounds kind of cool, that you're like a supermind, sounds kind of super. But I just wanted to bring this up real quick. Have you seen Terminator 2 Redemption Day?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's kind of like in the future where they show that robots took over the world and how like robots are like now killing humans, and then there's like cyborgs, and then that one cyborg, that Arnold Schwarzenegger, is that how you say it? But
Be careful now. That's our former governor.
he came in the past and he actually tried to save that kid, but where there was another robot, he was like a liquidy robot, a liquid substance, I forgot the name, but those two, like, they have like a kind of a fight, and it's kind of cool, you know, how there's that one robot that's trying to protect someone where there are all the others that are trying to kill that one person. It's kind of cool.
It definitely is. And in each case, and this is kind of like Ender's Game, there's a rethinking of what is the enemy, you know, and is the enemy really evil all the time, or is there kind of a spectrum of good and evil, not an either or?
Does this worry you, Om? So this is an idea that's been prevalent, you know, in my generation, this idea of the machines taking over and taking out the humans. Does that worry you, or do you see it a different way?
I would see it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Bob, what were you saying?
No, you go ahead, Om.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it doesn't really worry me. Like, it's kind of like just a bit of a mix, because depends how you see it. Like, in my point of view, it could be different. Like, they should always keep a plan B. You know, you should always have a plan B. Because if you do make robots like that help you, like if you've seen iRobot, the Will Smith movie, like the robots are really like nice, but there's one robot that has the 3 rules of not hurting humans and stuff, except he can choose not to obey them, so he's kind of like a malfunction. So you should always keep like an emergency switch off button somewhere that like switches off all the other robots. You know, you should always keep a plan B. Like, I think it might happen. Like, if it does, like, robots are definitely going to be a thing, but I don't know if they'll take over. Like, it's either 50-50, and you should always keep like an emergency button that turns off all the other robots.
Yep. Yeah, it's really, iRobot is another great movie in this regard, and it's based on the Isaac Asimov Rules for Robots, which is a real article. It's a real academic article that stimulated that. But you notice even Will Smith had an artificial arm, you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a cyborg. You know, he was part computer.
He was part cyborg.
Human.
That's why he hated robots and stuff.
What Om said there is very interesting to me, Bob. He said you always need to have a way of switching them off. You know, so this is very Asimov here. Sorry, this is famous author Isaac Asimov, which my other son is named after. You know, so you know, this is this idea that humans somehow need to have that ability to stop intelligent machines from going too far. How are we feeling about that, Bob?
Yeah, you know, I'm just not that worried about that. I'm worried about other things, but but I'm not that worried about that, because that's such a simplistic idea of human machines as if they were 2 completely separate things. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see this blending, this powerful blending, this artistic blending of human and machine intelligence. Now, there are real issues here, but to go back to your reminder about the forecast, anything that can be distributed will be distributed. That applies to computing too. So beginning with the core technology of the internet, packet switching, which was invented by one of our founders at Institute for the Future, Paul Barron, the notion, the way he explained it, was we send information out there, it gets broken into packets, and it doesn't get assembled till the other end. But that creates networks that have no center. They can't be controlled, although they can be guided, and they grow from the edges. They're very powerful, and anything that can be distributed will be distributed. So to me, the big concern is not that the robots are going to take over, or that we're going to have governments take over like fascism or authoritarianism. That's unlikely, because anything that can be distributed will be distributed. What is really worrisome is that we lose our faith in the system, we lose our trust in the system, and we lose the ability to govern ourselves. And so everything that can be distributed will be distributed, and we lose that ability to find common ground, to work together. But that working together is going to be, again, a hybrid of humans and machines, not a separation.
Thanks, Bob. What you brought up there is really, you know, what we call an existential challenge, which means it's a challenge to our existence, you know, and your generation faces a lot of these types of challenges. I wanted to see what you worry about for the future, what you think the big problems are facing the world at the moment, and maybe some of your thoughts about how we might overcome them in the future.
Well, some of my biggest fears are like global warming. That's kind of pretty big. Like, whereas if you think now it's not that big, but like for example, if you leave a giant cut untreated, it wouldn't do that much. But if you go forward and not even put any like alcohol wipes on it, it could get worse and it could actually kill you. Whereas like that, even a little thing like that could kill you. But that's just like global warming. It's starting out as a little thing, but it could be worse and destroy stuff.
And what are your ideas on about how we might, you know, take on that challenge of global warming? What do you think we need to do?
Now, we could take on that challenge in a really big way. Like Elon Musk, right? He's making some big advancements in technology, like electric cars, the electric Tesla, and the Cybertruck. The Tesla Cybertruck. I think he said it's going to be like bulletproof or something, which is, yeah, it's really cool. And we could we could overcome global warming by just trying to I'm not saying to completely zero our electrical and our gas use. I'm like zero, it won't work. Like you can't completely zero. You just lessen it, like from this to this. Kind of lessen it, not zero it, because that's just impossible. Just lessen it, decrease.
Well, although it is interesting, you know, Microsoft recently made a commitment to go down to carbon positive and to switch not only to carbon zero. So I think there is hope. There is hope, and I'm really pleased to hear you say what you're saying, and my expectation is that young people like you and your age and younger. You know, Greta Thunberg's just 5 years older than you are, and there's thousands of Greta Thunbergs around the world now that are very upset about global climate disruption, or the climate emergency is the word we're using around that, the climate emergency. And you know, you're actually very reasonable about it, and kind of you're saying, well, it's okay to just bring it down to here. But there's a lot of young people I talk to who are very impatient, and even some of them are very angry about this. That, you know, my forecast is it's going to be a very big pressure point to have these young people come of age, and those of us who are digital immigrants haven't done a good job on this one.
No, that's right. So you pointed there to some new technologies that we need to embrace, you know, so it's things that we need to do and new approaches that we need to take on that challenge. So I think that's a really interesting opportunity now to share between generations. You know, Bob, I guess you're sort of more in that elder, you know, wise elder.
I'm an elder.
And, you know, and Om's a digital native and I'm somewhere in between. I would love to hear your ideas about how, you know, you see Om's generation maybe tackling those really big existential challenges that face us today.
Well, I think the beginning is they're so digitally connected that for them, they're viewing the whole world as their network and their responsibility and their vision. And they're upset at us for carving up the world and destroying the world in many cases, and making harmful decisions about the environment. So I think young people are going to grow up with digital abilities that we can only imagine, and a kind of interest in making things better that I find inspiring. But the key is hope. I mean, to have hope about, you know, what is your clarity? And as long as you have your clarity about direction, I'm very optimistic. So I'm very optimistic about Om. I've loved getting to know Om, and the challenge is how can we embrace young people and help them channel that energy in positive ways.
And Om, over to you. What gives you hope for the future?
Well, I would say the future is bright. Like, it could be bright, but it could be a dark sad place. But like in some cases, we can always change the future, but we can also ruin it. Like if we do, like I think the future could be good if we actually try and act on what we have done wrong. Like if we take immediate action, I don't think much could happen. But if we like slowly try to change, then lots could happen. Like they could make a big difference from what the future could be, and it is.
So we're almost at the end of our journey today, but on what you're really talking about there is something that Bob is an expert in, and I love the language you wrap around this, Bob. You talk about living 10 years in the future and looking long, but also looking back from the future. So when you hear what Om just said, can you tell us about those ideas about looking back from the future and how that empowers us, and especially empowers younger people?
Sure. And, Om is a natural at this. And, it's not mysterious. It's basically just realizing that almost nothing happens that's truly new. And almost everything that happens was tried and failed years ago. So the real question is not what's new. The real question is what's ready to take off. What's at that point of takeoff. And the way to see that is not past, present, future. It's future back. And it's surprising, and maybe my biggest surprise in all my years of doing this is it's actually easier to look 10 years ahead than it is 1 or 2 years ahead. So for example, 10 years out, it's obvious we'll have sensors everywhere. They'll be very small, very cheap. Many of them will be connected, and some of them will be in our bodies. That's just obvious 10 years from now. What's not obvious is what's going to happen over the next year with regard to sensors. So if you can think future back and then make your decisions, and the basic way we do this, and at Institute for the Future, we do foresight training and we teach people how to be futurists, and we do all these virtual. So any of you can sign up, just go to our website. We teach people the cycle of prepare, foresight, insight, action. And it's a continuous cycle. Prepare, foresight, insight, action. We all have to be doing it. And, we should live most of our lives in the action space because that's where we get things done. But we have to continuously cycle from foresight to insight to action. And part of prepare is to learn the lessons in the past. And, the future doesn't repeat itself, but it often does echo in some way. And we want to be able to hear those echoes and then think future back. And I think you've realized it just getting to know Om in this session. He already thinks future back. He thinks full spectrum. It's just natural until we categorize it out of kids. So we need to take that energy and learn from the kids. It's reverse mentoring.
So this idea of future back really comes back to leadership as well, the people who lead us. How do you feel about your leaders, whoever they are in your life? Are they looking back from the future? Do they have big ideas about the future and giving us a plan for that? How do you see it?
Well, my uncle, right? He has some amazing, big ideas about the future. He really thinks that after COVID, everything's gonna change. He thinks the way we communicate, the way we do stuff, it's all going to change. And he thinks he has some big ideas about the future, like how we do everything and how we are going to be in the future, 10 years into the future, stuff like that.
Wow.
And I mean, how do we get more people thinking like this, Bob? Our young people, but especially our leaders, of the future. This is, I think, critically important, and the reason we're doing this show. How do we, stimulate this idea that people need to have a plan for the future?
Yeah, well, I think the beginning of it, I do think your uncle's right in the sense that the COVID crisis gives us an opportunity to be frightened on a global scale and to take stock of what we need to do better. And we need to ask the question, what should we do together? What's our common ground? Because the virus doesn't care what country you're in. It spreads across national boundaries. We have to think about it globally. And it's a chance to restart, to reimagine, to figure out how to do things better. And I do think learning in a cross-generational way is so powerful because, those of us who are digital immigrants, we have license to play the wisdom game because we've seen things that you haven't. But you've got powers we don't have. You've got superpowers, to grow up in ways you'll see things that I won't be able to see. So we have to do cross-generational mentoring, cross-generational learning. And we have to ask that question, what should we choose to do together? And we should be making a lot more choices about what we should do together. What's our new common ground?
What do you say to that, Om?
I would say that, Bob's right. He has a great point, about the future and everything that he said. And I would say that, our new common ground, it's kind of like nowadays, it's everybody, most people have a car, most people use the internet, most people just use everything that are different for elderly people, like grandparents and stuff like that. They are new to this, they don't know how to use the new phones and stuff like that. But some of them do. I'm not saying they don't, but we're adapted to it since we've been born into it.
Nice.
Okay, well, I gotta say, Bob, it has been such a pleasure having you both on today, talking about the future of the future. I think there's a little futurist in all of us, and and we want to see more of that. And I can't wait to see what your 10-year plan looks like. Thank you both for joining us. Bob, before we leave off, is there anything you'd like to say?
Wow, I just hope I get a chance to work with sometime in the future. So we got to figure out some way to get together virtually and do some gaming the future together. Thank you. It's been such a delight getting to know you, and I've got such respect for how you think about the future. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a delight. It's been a pleasure to meet both, come here and on this show. And it's been a pleasure to talk to Bob.
Great.
Okay, thank you both. Thanks for being on Futurists World, your home for big ideas about the future. Remember to comment, share, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.